Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. Such a pleasure to speak to you. Maybe you could kick off with a brief introduction to Streetwise. Tell us a little bit about what the film's about.
这个电影讲的是关于修人的游荡和挣扎。
In a nutshell, the film is about struggle and it's about wandering aimlessly in the streets.
What was the inspiration for the story? And in particular, what drove the decision to set it in the recent past?
这个故事启发基本上源自我对自己的另外一种人生的追问。假如说我没有学习艺术，那我会不会像这些人一样在街上瞎晃然后我把故事设定在2004年，是因为在当时的中国，2004年、2000年初的时候，21世纪刚出头的时候，是有一个迁移潮的一个接近尾声的时候，大批的年轻人从小城市涌向大城市，所以在那个时代当中发生了很多事情，然后我的留在地的年轻人是没有走的那一批人。
So the inspiration was really about me speculating about another possible life that I might have had if I hadn't done what I did. So in my case, I studied art, and I often wonder if I hadn't studied art, what would I be doing now? So that was the inspiration for the story. And I chose the year 2004 as the setting of the film because at the beginning of the 20th century, China was in a period where it was the end of a migration wave from smaller cities and towns to the bigger cities. And so this was a time when a lot of things were happening. And the focus of this film is really on those local people who stayed behind, who didn't migrate to the cities.
And in that sense, the locations feel really crucial to the film. And there's a real sense of place, you know, kind of going into the interiors of the shops and the sort of neon lights and some of the arcades and things like that. So how important was the location to the film?
Yeah, of course, that's correct. Location is very important.
Maybe he can talk a bit about the way the film is shot and how he wanted it to look, because it's at times, you know, there's stark realism there, and other times it's got an incredible visual look to it. So what was the balance between realism and a stylized look?
我基本是在做一个，我现在在我脑子里我会做减法，比如像我们布光的方式就会根据现场的真实情况来，比如有路灯，那我们就借路灯的光，换掉路灯的灯泡，然后比如有那个，然后还有一点是我们每开一镜都会地面洒水，洒水车都会过2辆，然后把地面洒满水，这样那个它就会形成一种高亮感。就不只是有路灯的光，是上和下都会有光，然后通过这一点，我们在做这个城市的潮湿的氛围。因为我在拍摄地几乎待了大概，加上拍摄几乎待了大概6个月、半年的时间，在这个时间当中呢，我会发现当地一些特别有趣的事情，就是比如说它有几大特点，我就会把这些特点放大，像是潮湿然后像是就它角落里都会特生动，比如说角落里会有叙事，就一个垃圾堆的一角可能有一只鞋，或者一个袖标，或者一个什么东西。
袖标，
比如说就是中国老太太管事儿会戴那个红袖箍的这个东西，类似这种东西。就你会在它局部里发现是，然后当我看景的时候，我甚至看到过一条3条腿的瘸狗跑过马路，这些都是真实发生的。其实我觉得我足够幸运能碰见这些。你问的问题是如何在真实和美学上做平衡？我觉得我碰到了。然后我找到一个相对准确的方式把它表现到，其实就平衡了。 只是那个平衡对我而言，并不是美学的事情，反而是不是电影跟现实之间的事，反而是多少的事情。然后的就那个缺口要不要放进来？你看到的局部的那个垃圾堆里的叙事，你要不要放进来？是我选择的多少的问题。
So we would film according to what we saw in a particular location. So, for example, we would change the lamps on the street lights to create a sort of a night experience with the street lighting to give it a more real feel. And in each scene that we had, we would pour water onto the street so that it would give it, I suppose, a different type of brightness. So you would have the brightness from the street lamps above, and also the brightness from the water on the ground below. So you'd have above and below, you'd both have different types of brightness. And that would create a sort of an urban landscape, the feel that we were trying to achieve. I spent about 6 months at the location where the filming was done, and we would discover all kinds of different things. Sometimes I would exaggerate some of the characteristics of the things that we saw. So, for example, you might see in a corner a shoe left by someone, or sometimes in China, a lot of older people have these sort of pads that they have on their arms to keep their sleeves clean. You would find that in the corner. And so I also saw, for example, a 3-legged dog crossing the road. So things like that we saw would obviously serve as inspiration for some of the things we would add into the film. And I feel very lucky that I experienced that as well. So you asked me about a balance between aesthetics and realism. It's more really about how much we decided to add of what we saw when we were choosing what to film. So it's not really about a balance between aesthetics and realism, but more about whether we decided to include a rubbish tip or a 3-legged dog crossing the road or not.
And you've got an incredible cast. How did you decide on who would play each character, and how did you work with them to achieve your vision?
演员，男一，志东这个角色，我大学的时候就认识他，之前就是朋友。然后米一就是我公司的演员，然后第一次见到米一，我就觉得他很特别啊，他身上有一个可以极接地气的和一个极飘的2种气质的混合，然后剩下的演员是他们通过他们的生活经历打动我，然后我跟他们每一个人都有一个深入的交流，然后了解到他们生活之后，我就逐个去用他们的生活经验去反推我的剧本，然后跟他们探讨角色。当演员确定了以后，我们会有一个围读的时候，大家提出对剧本的想法啊，对每场戏的想法，然后我们就在争论，然后最终确定一个方案。当然，这个方案只是在文本阶段的工作确定的方案，去现场还会变啊，去现场还会发生改变，根据现场的情况、跟氛围和每个人状态去再改变。我通常的习惯都是，我没有一个我认为这个人物应该是什么样，反而是，或者说我一定要让这个人物按照我的那个想象来，反而是演员能提供给我的和我所能去预设的东西结合起来，这样做，大概就是这样。
The actor Zhidong, the main male character in the film, was a university friend of mine, so I've known him for a very long time. Mi was an actress at my company, and the first time I saw her, I knew that she was very special. She was at the same time very down to earth, but she was also very out there as well. So she had these two different persona to her. For the other actors, it was really based on their life experience. I chatted to these other actors as well, and I listened to what their life experience was like. So that also affected the characters in the screenplay before we started filming. So when we'd chosen the actors, we decided to then ask the actors their views about the screenplay and the scenes that they were involved in. And then we came up with a plan. Obviously, that plan changed after that, depending on the environment and the situation, etc. But my way of working is not really I don't really have any preconceived ideas about what the actors should be like, and I don't want to mold the actors into the type of person I want them to be in the film. It's more about finding a balance between what the actors want to do themselves and what the characters in the screenplay are trying to transmit.
With the main character, Dongzi, we sort of see two very different sides. So there's kind of the ultra masculine, kind of violent side of the work he's having to do, but we also see his emotional struggles and the relationships that play out both with the two-parlor owner and with his father. So we see both his tough side and his softer side, and we're able to have empathy in that way. So how do you want us to see that character?
我希望观众在东子的身上看到自己，或者说我更希望观众在这5个人身上都能看到自己或者自己身边的人。这个是我最想做到的，反而可以忘掉那些人物，然后想起自己。
What I really hope is that the audience can see themselves in Dongzi and the other characters as well. So I hope that when they watch the film, they forget about the characters, but rather think about themselves and what they can see in themselves through those characters.
And it seems like China is going through quite a period of change. How does he feel about, the current situation in China and perhaps the freedom to make films as you want without any kind of restriction?
我认为，首先，我已经大概有很长一段时间不看新闻，不看微博之类的东西，我都手机关掉，然后待在机房里或者待在书房里，大概是这样。所以我对中国发生了什么事情不是特别清楚，然后我觉得近几年中国发生最大的事情就是疫情控制的还不错，然后这个我是知道的。然后另外呢，我是觉得在世界各地拍片子其实都会有限制，不只是在中国。那中国电影现状其实还不错，因为它有几乎是最大的国际市场，还有它的大家都在努力精进自己的修为，在电影层面，然后年轻人机会比以前多很多，然后你的拍电影资源会越来越好。如果说困难的话，可能我觉得唯一的困难就是人对自己有过高的判断，创作者一旦对自己有一个过高的估计跟判断的话，就会出现选择上的失误，然后那个心理落差会非常巨大，基本上都是要承受那种心理落差吧。我觉得大概是就是我综上所述的情况。
So for a very long time, I haven't watched the news. I haven't even looked at Weibo, which is a Chinese blogging website. I turn off my phone a lot when I'm sitting in the studio. So I've spent a lot of time in the studio working. So I'm actually not really sure what's been happening in China during the making of this film. What I do know is that in recent times, China's managed to control the epidemic very well within the country. I think in terms of restrictions, there are restrictions to making films in many different parts of the world, not just in China. I think the situation in China for film and filmmakers is actually quite good. It is probably one of the biggest international markets in the world for film. And I know that people in the film industry are working very hard to make films, and young people have a lot more opportunities now than they did before, and also more resources to make films. Perhaps the difficulty is sometimes that people in the film industry have either too high expectations of themselves or too high opinions of themselves. And that can sometimes lead them to make the wrong decisions.
And finally, how does it feel to have the film at Cannes Film Festival, particularly given the last year we've had in terms of the pandemic, which has obviously really curtailed the ability to make films and show films in cinemas? So how does it feel to have a film out right now at Cannes?
我觉得疫情冲击着各个行业，很多家小的这个小饭馆啊，或者小手工业， 个体户倒闭，然后，但是今年戛纳也很勇敢嘛，就很多电影节都办线上了，但是戛纳还是觉得要办线下。我觉得首先入选戛纳我很幸运，在这放片子我也很幸运，我第一次拍就能进到 Aston Regard， 我觉得就幸运吧，
I feel very lucky. In the last year or so, the pandemic's affected all industries. A lot of restaurants, a lot of small businesses have all closed down. So they've suffered a lot. But I think Cannes is very brave to hold the film festival this year face to face, because a lot of other film festivals have decided to go online this year. So I think Cannes is very brave in that respect. And I think I feel very lucky that my first film has managed to get into the Un certain regard category here at Cannes.
Amazing. Well, I think I'm out of time, but it was a real pleasure to speak to you. Thanks so much for your time.
时间就到了，特别感谢你今天的采访。
好的，谢谢你。
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks. Bye. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.